Good morning. I'm Jenna Gabrial Gallagher, and this is my husband, Brian Gabriel, and our daughters Beatrix, Irish, and Millie. And some people call us the Gaga family. I had drafted some notes for this a few weeks ago, and like so many things this week, we kind of had to reimagine. So I had to do a few things over again, but here goes. I'm going to start with a little background about our history as a family with Countryside. I grew up in a devoutly Catholic family, and so I always assumed that when and if I ever had children, I would raise them Catholic as well. But when we moved to Omaha shortly after Trixie was born and before Irish came along, we kind of shopped around for a Catholic church, and there really wasn't one that fit our values. And so we used to drive by the old church on Pacific Street and would see the sign that said jazz service every Sunday. And we were like, hey, let's give that one a try. So we got here on that first Sunday, and Mary Beth Link greeted us, and she sort of whisked the girls away to the nursery. And I was like, wow, we can actually just sit there for a whole hour and focus on the sermon. But of course, those were the days when Eric was giving the sermon, so it was really more like an hour and a half. And then we got into this, got into the meat of things, and it was the examen, and he said, I want you to focus on a time in the last 24 hours where you have shown love. And then he paused, and he said, and then I want you to focus on a time, and my mind immediately rushed to fill in the blank, where you failed to show love, is what I thought he would say, because, I was raised Catholic, and shame's kind of a currency there, But he didn't say that. He said, where you have had love shown to you. And I was like, wow, that's a really expansive way to look at things. And so we got further in the service, and the jazz started, and that was amazing. And, we have, like, the best jazz musicians in Omaha. We still have the best jazz musicians in Omaha performing every week. And so after it was all over, I looked at Brian, and I was like, well, what do you think? And he's like, oh, my God, what are we going to tell your parents? But my parents got over it, and we entered like a golden age of church attendance. I mean, we joined the family activities committee and, met other families of young children, and all those children are here and they're teenagers now. And Brian and I both sat on boards, and I taught Holy Moly, and Brian ushered, and I mean, we were in it. Every Sunday, it was like a TED Talk and like a jazz concert, all kind of combined into one. It was great. And we'd go to Pride, and the whole church was there. I mean, we'd just all show up. So that was pretty amazing. And it all trucked along beautifully until 2016 happened. And even then, though, it was a dark, dark time, but through it all, our kids were seeing our values being lived by the members of this congregation. They would show up at all the protests and the rallies that we were going to back then. I mean, it was like a whole quorum of Countryside people were there every single time. And so we were really seeing that God was still speaking, even when things were really dark. And, when, like, racism and xenophobia was running rampant in this country, our church sort of welcomed a family from Syria. We went to the airport. We got them acclimated into their new home. I know that some members who are still here were like taking the family to ESL classes, and it's because of the generosity of the people of this church that we were able to kind of stand against the prevailing things that were going on in our country. And then a little bit later, when we moved here to the Tri-Faith campus, my girls were able to also, again, see that God was still speaking, because they were attending events where their schoolmates from AMI and Temple were also there. And honestly, the fact that we were even at Tri-Faith, that Tri-Faith was even founded, was because people were imagining more. And the fact that we as a congregation were there is because we voted to imagine more. And so, after 2020, our attendance kind of dropped off a little bit. There's really no reason other than just there was a lot going on, and it was really hard to get people out of the house for a 10 o'clock service every week. But every time we came back, we would just feel, we never really felt like we left the community. It was always here for us. Everybody always welcomed us with open arms. And so, since we've been coming a little bit more regularly, Irish is attending confirmation classes, and last summer, Trixie went to the anti-racism tour of the South, and she got so much out of it. It was such a meaningful experience for her. And I'm really excited that Millie, who missed a couple of the kind of formative experiences that the older girls had at the church, now has a chance to be part of something that was so foundational for us as a family. So, again, this past week, we sort of got hit like a Mack truck again, and we have another chance to see what we can do when the world is thinking smaller and thinking less. We have a chance to see what we can do when we imagine more. And I'm going to turn it over to Brian now, and he's going to just go into the nuts and bolts of that a little bit.
Thank you. But before I actually have a few comments, Jen and I thought it'd be nice for the girls maybe to just provide, something about what they would imagine more for Countryside. So, Trixie, Irish, what would you imagine more?
So like my mom mentioned, that Tour of the South was incredibly meaningful for me. And we'd both like to see more opportunities like that in the future.
Millie, what would you imagine more of for Countryside?
Free pony rides.
Free pony rides. Okay, well, I guess I did ask, right? I don't know if that's on the list, but we'll see. So just as a short introduction, I'm currently the District Officer of Business and Finance for Westside Community Schools. Prior to that, I was the Finance Director for the Learning Community of Douglas and Sarpy County. Here at Countryside, I currently serve on the Board of Finance and Operations, which I still just want to call the Board of Trustees so badly, but it's not anymore. And finally, I am the current treasurer of the Gaga Household Executive Board, although I'm constantly reminded that is a non-voting position. So you could say I spend a lot of time thinking about money and how it's spent. And lately, it's occurred to me that I'm being misunderstood in many of these roles. Apparently, my reputation is who you ask only if you want to hear no. You want what? No. That costs how much? No. No. So I can definitely understand where this misconception comes from, but I would like to set the record straight. It isn't that I don't want to spend money, I just don't want to spend money dumbly, which I didn't know was a real word, but it actually is. It was good. Okay, to be more accurate, I want to spend money in the most optimum way. After all, we only have so much money, and we all have to decide how to prioritize the $10 worth of demands that each of us have on every $1 we have. Because in all the positions I've served and currently serve, there's one common trait, and that is there's never really enough to do everything we want to do, and hard choices have to be made. Hopefully by now you're convinced that the money pledged to Countryside is one of the best investments you can make in your community. And if I could be indulged just one request, it would be for each of you to take a second look at your personal finances and really examine if there's any room to shift even a few dollars of something you're currently spending on to an investment in this church and this community. And since it wouldn't be fair for me to ask anything I wouldn't do for myself, I've taken it upon myself to examine the Gaga household budget. For example, after crunching numbers, I would estimate I spend probably about $1,500 annually on Diet Coke. Now, it would be a very, very bad idea to cut that budget completely to zero, not only for me, but frankly for anybody around me in the morning. But mix in a few glasses of water and voila, maybe you have a couple bucks to reallocate to something else. Likewise, Trixie. Want to guess how much we spend annually on black eyeliner and pre-ripped jeans? $500. Irish. Taylor Swift bracelet materials and iPhone screen protectors. $650. Millie. Stuffed animals and squishmallows? Budget annually, $400. And Jenna. Jenna. So in closing, folks, please consider taking a second look with an eye at supporting this church, because even beyond the wonderful things we're talking about imagining more of, I'm fairly positive that recent events are probably going to cause a substantial growth in the needs of our community to support different marginalized groups, especially those in our immigrant community. So thank you for your consideration.